So, growing up in a family with immigrants who came to Canada, after the Second World War, I was taught that very European, very immigrant work ethic. And my folks really taught me quite well, and were quite strong in that if you're doing a job, if you're getting paid to do a job, if you're doing honest work, you take pride in the work you do, and you do your best, and you work hard at it, and you take it seriously, and that's just the way it goes. And presumably you'll get appreciated in whatever raises or promotions or whatever may come along, but nonetheless you take pride and you do a good job at whatever you do, right? And you know what? That might be the most important skill that I learned from my grandparents, was that exact attitude, right? And I'm not saying other people don't learn that, or I certainly don't want to come across as, oh, the young generation, they don't. I've met many a young people who had very good work ethic, and I've met many older people and people in my age group that had horrible work ethic, right? And but for whatever reason, I learned it from my grandparents, and they really were, that was quite strong in them, and they modeled that behavior to me, and talked about it too, but very much they modeled that. And so because of it, my work career has been fairly strong, and I worked part-time while I went to high school, and then from there spent some time. I initially, when I graduated, I went and worked in the Yukon, and I was in a big mine there, and I didn't really like, the community was very isolated. Those were the old days when they weren't camp jobs. Nowadays, a mine like I worked in Faro would actually probably be a camp job in this day and age, but they weren't back then. Back then, in the 80s, and I mean, this mine had opened up in the late 60s. But back then, when a mine opened up, they built a whole town. They built houses, and stores were built, and people moved to this with their families, and schools were built, and you lived there. You didn't just fly in and fly out like you do now. And so at 18, I moved to this town in the central Yukon, and man, I didn't really, it was so isolated. I didn't really like it, and I left. I was only there for, I don't know, maybe 8 months. I ended up back in my hometown, and I got a job. So at that time, that was the late 80s. And so the economy was not good, particularly in Western Canada. It was rough, man. There wasn't a lot of work. But my hometown, there was a big project at the pulp mill there. And so there was some things going on, right? And so I got a job at the local building supply. And that work ethic of my grandparents really kind of came in handy. That they appreciated that, even as an 18, well, I was almost 19 by that point. That I was willing to just do the job, right? And believe me, they cut me some slack, man. The guy who owned the place, he cut me some slack. He knew my family. He was a good man, and he took the time to teach me things like how to operate a forklift, and I learned about building supplies and stuff like that. And I worked there for 11 years, and actually got married and had a family while I was working there. And it wasn't the greatest job, but it wasn't a bad job either.